Now, there was good news early this week for fans of archive television when it was announced that audio recordings had been found of the lost 1966 BBC Two series On the Margin. The six-part satirical sketch show is well known for being an early work of Alan Bennett and also featured future BBC political reporter and Strictly Come Dancing star John Sargent. But what's perhaps not so well known is that the show raised the ire of Mary Whitehouse for being offensive to the people of Norwich. To find out more, I've been speaking to Chris Perry, a television historian who works with the archive TV organisation Kaleidoscope, who helped to recover the recordings.
Well, when BBC Two started in 1964, I think part of their brief was to be a lot more based around the arts and culture, and they became a channel really that showcased new, quite satirical comedians who were coming through, people like Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. And Alan Bennett was part of that generation of people who came along who, they were not doing normal sitcom at all, you know. And On the Margin is quite a significant satirical review show because it kind of set the kind of groundwork for many other comedians to follow in years to come. And I think it's always been regarded as, one of Alan Bennett's finest works. Because of Alan Bennett himself, he's such a cultured and intelligent man, he wasn't going to just use any old actors, and he certainly wasn't going to go and try and use what you might call your standard stock faces that were popular at the time, like, you know, Freddie Frinton or people like that. So he went out of his way to find very educated people like Jonathan Miller and John Sargent.
Now, I think it's reasonably well known among a lot of people these days that a lot of television from previous decades is lost, it was wiped, it was got rid of, but I believe On the Margin was perhaps very slightly luckier than most in that it did actually get a repeat before it was wiped.
It was very popular on BBC Two. It was repeated a year later on BBC One, which means it must have been recorded. Part of the soundtrack was kept and actually released as a record. So it's very enigmatic as to why it was kind of junked then in 1972.
And obviously we've had the good news announced this week that it's not been recovered in visual form, but it has been found in audio form, and your organisation Kaleidoscope helped to bring that about. Can you explain to us how this recovery happened?
Yes, I was making a film last year, and I went to see a gentleman down in Somerset, and I was just talking to him, and he was telling me that he had this large audio collection, about 3,000 reels. And I said to him, well, he really ought to go onto our website at lostshows.com and have a look at whether any of his recordings were missing recordings. And then about 3 weeks ago, at an event we did in Stourbridge, he just turned up with a tape and said, I think this tape will interest you. It's got all the editions of On the Margin on it. So I gave it to Neil Ingo, who's one of our audio restorers, to go away and have a look and see if that was true. And indeed it was. And there it is.
Now, one of the intriguing things that's come out in the news about this recovery that may be of interest to listeners of BBC Radio Norfolk is that the programme was complained about by the famous Mary Whitehouse, the moral campaigner, because she thought the programme was insulting to Norwich. Can you explain a bit more about that?
There's a very funny sketch with a man trying to send a telegram. It's Alan Bennett sitting there in his chair talking to the post office at the time, and he's trying to send this telegram to his mistress, and he's trying to use all these different anachronisms, and he's using the anachronism of Norwich, you know, to stand for something rather rude. But the fact he keeps repeating this word Norwich, I guess, probably upset Mary Whitehouse, who thought that there was an association there between, you know, Norwich the place and Norwich being rude. And I think only Mary Whitehouse could probably have made that kind of connection. Nobody else would.
And if people want to find out more about the work Kaleidoscope does, what's the best website to go to?
www.kaleidoscopearchive.co.uk. Or if they think they've got a missing recording, go to www.lostshows.com.
That was Chris Perry from the archive television organisation Kaleidoscope telling me about the recovery of the audio copies of the show On the Margin, and I have absolutely no idea what the rude acronym for Norwich could possibly have been. Except I didn't think Norwich had a K in it.
Norfolk News, Norfolk Life.
This is BBC Radio Norfolk.